name is Rosie. I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and I actually moved to Kansas City in September of 2021 due to domestic violence, and I just wanted to restart my life and get closer to God and just make sure I was in a safe place. The place that really helped me the most when I first moved here was RosieXperience. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with RosieXperience, but it's a domestic violence shelter. And I moved my 4 babies at the time to RosieXperience, and they had a housing program that after I was done with the 3-month program, they assisted me with my bills for a whole year so that I was able to focus on growing financially, and then also focus on healing my mind and everything. I learned to give my life to God in April of 2022 because I didn't really know what it felt like to give your life to God. I thought that if you believed in Him and that you prayed, that you gave your life to Him. So I didn't really understand why I kept going through the same cycles all the time. But when I realized that I needed to surrender by changing the types of things that I did, the way that I talked, the people that I had around me, I literally had to change everything about myself so that I could make God feel comfortable to come into my life, because He doesn't force Himself to anybody. So I had to clean my life out so that I could actually hear Him. And so after I did that, I was delivered from multiple different things, and they're all outlined in the book. But the main things that I wanted to point out was self-doubt, codependency, low self-esteem, domestic violence, bisexuality, lust, mental illness, and dependency on secular music. Those were the main things that God saved me from, and that God really worked on me with. Like I said, I really go deep into it in the book, but my target audience for my novel are women who are over the age of 18, who are tired of repeating the same cycles and are looking to heal so that they can overcome the victim mentality and flourish. Now, that does not mean that women are the only ones who could benefit from my book, because men and women will find revelation in my story and in the things that God has taught me about myself. But my target is definitely women who feel stuck and don't understand why they are still going through the same cycles every day. So the segment in my book that I'm going to read, I'm going to be reading page 209 through 213, and this focuses on mental illness in my childhood and being abused and raped by my ex-husband. So this is the part that I'm going to start at. I don't know what chapter I'm on. I didn't check that part. Chapter 16. It's called Why Do Fools Fall in Love, but it's in the middle of that chapter. Okay. One morning, as my eldest sister, Shinesha, was to board her school bus, my father followed her outside wearing his red jumpsuit and started to yell obscenities at her bus. My mother followed him outside and attempted to get him to retreat to the house. This just caused him to lay out on the street behind my sister's bus. I can only imagine how embarrassed she was to be a new student at her school and have her father laying outside of her bus stop wearing a red jumpsuit in the heat. Sasha, Jerice, and I went to Jefferson Elementary around the corner from our house, and my mother typically walked us there. We were not able to leave for school due to my mother attempting to calm my father's irrational behavior and save us from being scared of him. What she did not realize was that we were way past being scared. We were terrified. Our father had been behaving irrationally all week, and now that we witnessed him attempting to get ran over by my sister's school bus, we were scared for our lives. My mother was short in stature, yet she was never afraid to take my father on whenever he became distraught or abusive. This time was on a different level though. I saw fear in her eyes that I never saw before. I could tell that she had no clue what he was capable of in that moment. And I decided to take it upon myself to call the police. I put my 2 sisters, Sasha and Jerice, in the bathroom and locked the door. I then grabbed the home phone and placed myself in the closet, cracking the door so that my father could not see me, yet leaving a big enough gap to watch over my mother. I screamed for the operator to send an officer as soon as possible because my father was now on the ground screaming, "I see my father, I'm burning, I'm in hell, I see my father, F you," in a high-pitched voice that I never witnessed him talking before. My father was being overtaken by demonic forces right before our eyes, and my mother was standing in front of him, ready for whatever, if it meant that she could protect her 3 little children from her husband. I was on the phone with the 911 operator. I recall my mother attempting to keep my father away from the back of the house where us 3 elementary kids were at. Neither of them knew our exact whereabouts due to the severity of the situation. My mother had her back turned to my sisters and I while my father was on the ground, rolling around screaming he was burning. I remember my father looking up at my mother and choking her. I witnessed him choke her on a few occasions in my young life, but this time was much different. He used so much force that my mother started to give up the fight. She was submitting to the fact that she just might not make it this time. I remember screaming on the phone, begging them to just hurry up and get here. By the time the ambulance got there, my father had to be tackled to the ground, and if I recall correctly, they had to tase him. He wound up flashing his genitalia to them, and they put him on a stretcher with the straps on his arms and legs. He was too strong for the handcuffs. He broke them with his wrist by simply flexing his muscles. We later found out that he was in a manic state, and during mania, the subject feels invincible, so anything that typically would hurt them doesn't, because their adrenaline is pumping so much that they cannot feel pain. This explains his super strength when he was choking my mother. This was not the first time my siblings and I wound up visiting a parent in the mental institution, because as a child, my mother's suicidal attempts landed her in there a few times. I remember witnessing my mother and father attempting to give up the fighting of living by taking themselves out on multiple occasions. This conditioned me to believe that when things got hard, just kill yourself. I wanted nothing more than to erase the hurt and pain from my parents' minds and hearts so that they could be a healthy example of love for their children. Yet I was not equipped to do so, which caused me to just internalize the trauma that I so desperately tried to ignore. Not only was this a toxic way of thinking, but I did not realize just how stained in my brain it was until I reached adulthood and had suicidal thoughts of my own that I never actually acted on, yet they consume me on a daily basis. As I transitioned to the hopelessness I felt during my near-fatal attack at the hands of my ex-husband back in 2018, keep in mind that mental illness never seemed to be a red flag to me because I lived in a childhood home where it was common and untreated. By the time we got into the house, William had mustered up so much strength that he not only slammed me up against every wall by my neck, but he also threw me on my bed and started to take my clothes off. The thought of another man experiencing his wife made him crazy, despite the fact that the opportunity only presented itself due to his mistreatment. All he could think about was how offended he was. He seemed to feel justified in his actions because to him, I was his property and he owned everything about me from my child to my last name to my body. Us living in separate homes as he cohabitated with his mistress was not acceptable enough for me to be able to move on with my life. He felt that I owed him my body, and to him, the fact that I hadn't slept with him since March and it was now July was not an indication that I no longer wanted him entering me, so he did what he always had done and he took it anyways. There were countless times in our relationship that I would cry and plead for him to get off of me, not only because I was not in the mood, but sometimes I would be in pain or on my cycle, or sometimes he had just abused me and I did not want to be bothered. This day was no different, and to me, it seemed that the more I cried, the harder he insisted. So I became a statue and froze still as he infiltrated my body in all the ways that he felt like consuming me. It did not help that he was close fist punching my inner and outer thighs as he kissed all over my body and violated me. In his mind, I wanted it, and I was in no position to bring him back to reality, so I surrendered and awaited his finale. I remember him whispering in my ear, "Did he do this to you?" right before he moved to another position or place on my body. I cried the whole time and begged him to stop, but he refused. He even yelled, "If you don't shut the F up, I'm gonna kill you, B." After he said that, I went numb. I have always been a master of escapism, so I went to my happy place in my head and let go of my attachment to my body while he finished. He was playing a sick game of does he do it like this? I had no choice but to answer him because he was punching me on my thighs and ribs as he raped me. So if I did not respond, he would hit me harder. And that is just a segment of the day that I decided that I needed to go to a domestic violence shelter the first time. I went to a shelter in 2018 because I left my ex-husband due to us having a newborn baby, and he still didn't stop cheating, he still didn't stop abusing me. But when I left him, I never healed from what he did. I just started another relationship, and then he came back and raped me and tried to kill me. So I didn't really know that the guy I started dating was abusive until I got out of the shelter and he then started abusing me. So now I'm gonna open up to Q&A. If anybody has any questions about my story or about like overcoming the victim mindset or just anything that you want to say, I think we got a few minutes. Anybody?